our LEPC meeting for the month of May. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jim. Go
Thanks,
ahead,
Daniel.
Trey.
So it's my pleasure to have a guest speaker with us who, if you're on Twitter, almost needs no introduction. I've enjoyed following her tweets, her comments, because she addresses issues from a legal perspective. I've been trying to learn more about the legalities of our profession for years, and really what we would be exposed to are typically, meetings with the Attorney General's office, Kathy Hutchins, who's fantastic. But really, it was just, she was willing to answer whatever questions we might have, but not really present anything to us because we don't know what we don't know. And so I'm not setting expectations for Brandy, but I know that she is full of knowledge as well as being a certified emergency manager. So she brings expertise on both sides of the house. Brandy, I'm going to read your bio, but I just want to make sure it's okay with you that we do record the session. Are you good with that?
I consent.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, so Brandy May is an attorney and emergency management consultant who's worked extensively in communications and public information, helping multiple organizations and agencies navigate their crisis and disaster strategies. Brandy's certification as an emergency manager and post-POSD instructor allowed her to manage crisis and teach public safety professionals how to coordinate information efficiently and effectively during preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation efforts. Her professional experience includes work in military and government, corporate, nonprofit, emergency management, homeland security, and public safety sectors, including a position as lead public information officer for a state emergency management agency. Brandy is a U.S. Army veteran, thank you for your service, who was born and raised in Deep South, Louisiana. And I will introduce you to another time to a gentleman who works for ODU, and his wife makes crawfish, a big pot of them every year, because they too are from Georgia. As a survivor of MST, a subsequent CPTSD diagnosis, and decades-long medical issues stemming from her assault, Brandy has worked tirelessly as an outspoken advocate for other survivors, veterans, and service members. In addition to CPTSD, Brandy has a diagnosis of ADHD, and Brandy is also autistic. Her education includes coursework in strategic communications from Purdue University, a Bachelor of Journalism from Northwestern State University, military public affairs training at the Defense Information School, certification as an emergency manager from the state of Georgia, and International Association of Emergency Managers, qualifications as a civil and domestic mediator, and certifications in field traumatology and compassion fatigue. Notable professional achievements include a statewide top 40 under 40 award in Georgia for her public relations work with veteran nonprofits, contributions on an Emmy award-winning project, placement of a previous employer on the Inc. 5000 highest growing company list, and named Savannah's most crushworthy human in a community-wide poll. Fortunately, she lost the overall title to Eddie the Skunk, who was raising money for a local wildfire or wildlife nonprofit. We would have voted for you, Brandy, just so you know.
I appreciate that.
Advocate for veterans, children, disabled persons, marginalized populations, and persons with mental health diagnoses. And Brandy's pronouns are she and her. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I think we're in for a treat, and we will turn it over to Brandy for a brief presentation, but this is also going to be a lot of conversation, questions that she'll be willing to answer for us. We have some that have been submitted already. So Brandy, when you're ready for those, we'll slide into that. But without further ado, Brandy, again, thank you so much for being willing to spend time with us. And we'll go ahead and look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. So thank you for that introduction. I'm trying to get my my screen is acting crazy. Daniel and Jim, I emailed you guys the PowerPoint. You are welcome to share with others. But I'm having issues with some of the drivers on my computer right now. So I'm not able to share the screen. It keeps putting in a pop-up telling me to update something, but then it won't tell me what to update. So if you guys are able to share that, it's in your email, that would be helpful. If not, I'm more than happy to just keep talking through it.
Yes, we're gonna do
Um,
that next. Let's give us one moment, Brandy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For those that are in attendance while they're getting that up, I just want to let you all know that I sound really good on paper. But the real me is a whole lot funny, a little bit quirky, serious when I need to be, and I hope approachable. So I hope that that bio didn't make me seem unapproachable. Before we
mentioned that you were approachable and didn't think I was some creepy stalker when I messaged you.
No, not at
Yeah,
all.
to comment on some of your comments, because they resonated with me. Because if I remember correctly, you were speaking on behalf of individuals with special needs. There was a connection with my daughter, and I was just able to approach you to kind of talk about that. So I found you very approachable. And there was no, stalking charges like I've gotten before.
That's good. That's good. If you send me $1 in the mail, then all of that is privilege that you just told me.
Thank you.
Awesome. Before we get started, I want to ask if anybody has any accessibility or inclusion accommodations that they'd like to request for me or for me to keep in mind, or if any come up while I'm giving this presentation and while we're talking, please know that you can send me a message or send one over to Jim and Daniel, and we will do our best to accommodate those. And I will also ensure that that my presentation is more accessible in those ways in the future. As for me, next slide. As for me, the accommodations that I'd like to request from the group really are just for the awareness that with the autism and some of my other diagnoses, I often have difficulty with auditory processing, and I do want this to be interactive. So I may ask for clarification. I may ask additional questions. I may turn on captions if I can. This just lets me process information so I can make sure that I'm, giving the information that that is accurate to whatever we might be discussing. Next slide. Like any good lawyer, I'm going to go ahead and put in some disclaimers. Nothing in these slides are legal advice. I'm not your lawyer. There's no attorney-client relationship, and I'm not licensed in Virginia. I'm licensed in Georgia, but my law partner is actually licensed in Virginia, so we do quite a bit of work up there. And my bio was already read, but here's the bullet point versions. This is my background. And I actually did quite a bit of research into declared disasters and the First Amendment during law school. By the way, I went to law school at 40 years old. There, I just aged myself. So I had already had the EM background by the time I went. So I did a lot of deep diving into First Amendment and declared disasters as part of my Juris Doctor thesis. So next slide for me. And just for awareness on how on earth did I get to this point? My career basically in a nutshell was Army journalist, marketing and PR, then a specialty in crisis PR, then EMPIO, then EM, and then honestly, I didn't have access to lawyers and I got tired of fighting with them. So I became one. But especially during that crisis PR, on forward, I spent a lot of time fighting with lawyers and words, and I just got tired of it. For me, it was easier to just go to law school for 3 years than to spend the rest of my life fighting with lawyers. So I know everybody is off camera. Next slide for me. You can use the reaction buttons or whatever works for this group, but how many of you have had the opportunity to ask questions about your job or position to your city or county attorney or state attorney, agency attorney? Okay, great. We have one. Because I've got the screen up this way, I can't see all hands that might be raised. Let me do this. All right, cool. Has anybody ever taken any training on how law or liability intersects with your job? Anybody ever been iffy? I can see one person, so that's what I'm going on if I don't see anything else on the screen. Has anybody ever been involved in or heard about lawsuits related to emergency management? Exactly. The head shake is no, and that is the common answer. Next slide for me. So um, here's my theories on why. Attorneys don't yet know about emergency management. I think we can all agree that usually if we say we work in emergency management, everybody's like, what is that? I've never heard of that. Attorneys are also the same. They don't know about us yet. So they don't know to go after us if something goes wrong. So that's a good thing. Being obscure is a good thing here. There are probably less than 15 licensed attorneys who have a CEM or a practitioner background. I know that I have searched long and hard for a mentor or for other colleagues that have the EM and the licensed attorney background, and I've not found many. The number that I found is actually less than 5, but I want to round up, so we'll go with 15. Many of your agency attorneys know administrative law, they know governmental law, but they don't really have the background and knowledge specifically in EM before they become an agency attorney. Usually you won't hear about cases because your city, county, state agency attorneys will handle the majority of them. And most of them will get thrown out on immunity grounds before they ever become actual litigation. And we'll go through that here in a little bit. There are a number of practitioners among us who have law degrees, but they may not have licenses, and they use that law knowledge on the EM side. So based on those reasons and probably others, there's a number of reasons why you probably haven't seen very many EM lawsuits. Next slide, but I think they're coming. And the reason for that, I've got it listed here, and I hate doing death by PowerPoint. I think it's a multifold reason as to why I predict that they're coming, but I do think that they're coming more so. So I can, from where I sit with the EM background and the law background and conversations and policy levels, I see that it's coming. Now, again, immunity may save quite a bit of those, but I really feel like EM practitioners really should have a very, very basic knowledge of the law for them to be able to effectively do their jobs, provide the services that they're supposed to provide for their communities, and also avoid liability. Next slide for me, please. So law is like a game of Tetris. I'm going to have to take you all the way around the baseball field before I can tie it up in a nice tidy bow. So I appreciate in advance you guys bearing with me. So I'm going to give you some background on some slides. So the Constitution and the Stafford Act. During blue sky days, the Constitution is what is considered a limiting document. Basically, it tells government what they can't do and what rights people have. But during disaster operations and emergency operations, the Constitution, through the Stafford Act and other acts, kind of flips on itself. And then it tells government officials what they must do. And it confers a requirement to act. It confers a duty for the preservation of life and property. And that is right in the very first sentence of the Stafford Act, which I don't have memorized, sadly. So during emergency and disaster operations, the requirements and the duties flip on themselves. Next slide for me. And generally speaking, there are 3 types of immunity. There's going to be your absolute immunity, which is judges, legislators, witnesses, prosecutors, and then you have qualified and sovereign immunity. The term immunity can mean any one of those, but these are the specific areas. As EM practitioners, government officials, these conversations are really going to focus more around qualified or sovereign. If you're working for an agency during an operation, sovereign immunity is probably going to be what, what you would fall under. Next slide for me. And the next slide, we're going to explain, I looked up through the Virginia code, Virginia laws. Virginia recognizes 3 areas of negligence and liability via negligence. And those areas of negligence are simple negligence, which is, as you can see, as you can read on the slide, the standard there is you're negligent if an ordinarily prudent person under the same circumstances would not have done the same thing. So that's the standard. But because you guys are EM practitioners with specialized training and knowledge and those sorts of things, you're more likely going to be scrutinized under the other 2 standards, which is gross and willful and wanton. And those really come along. Those standards there are if you're just completely neglectful, completely indifferent, and you just completely disregard another person's rights, right to life, right to property, all of those things in the Bill of Rights. And if you're recklessly indifferent to the consequences of your actions, you know that working in disasters, that your actions can lead, or inactions can lead to loss of life or property because you're trying to preserve it. If you're recklessly indifferent to that duty and to the consequences of your actions, then you might, fall under or be liable for willful and wanton negligence. And I guess I should have probably put this in the disclaimer. These are bullet point slides that do not nearly encompass all of the nuance of law and these sorts of things. This is very, very high level. Next slide for me, please. So I kind of grayed out the area, but this is from Virginia Code. Basically, if you are operating during an emergency or during a training exercise or formal training under emergency management, or the state EM department asks you to do something, you are not going to be, I don't know why it took out, shall not be liable. I don't know why the copy paste took out the word not. That's super important. I'll fix that. But you shall not be liable. They're not going to find you liable for things that you do if you're doing it under the orders or, under a disaster declaration. That's probably for simple negligence, because there at the bottom in blue, it says it does not preclude liability as a result of gross negligence, recklessness, or willful misconduct. And that relates back to the other slide previously. So what that really means is simple negligence. You guys have too much experience in training. Simple negligence is not what you would be, what standard you'd be held to. You would, or, scrutinized under. It would really be if you're indifferent, have conscious disregard, and you just don't care about the safety of persons. That's a really high barrier to meet, just if we're all being honest here. In my law practice, I'm a plaintiff's attorney for the most part. So I have sued and done litigation against government agencies. I haven't done any EM agencies yet, but I know the day that happens that I'll be declared a traitor, I'm sure. But I have gone against government entities, and these sorts of standards are very high bars. Just so you know, I don't want any of these slides to, to scare you. This is more for knowledge sake. Next slide for me. So I've kind of, explained some background and shown the code. So let me synthesize this for you. What does all of that mean for you or your agencies or committees? You have a duty to preserve life and property. As an EM professional and during EM operations, you're considered more than an ordinarily prudent person. You're a professional with special knowledge. And based on that special knowledge, you know that your actions or inactions can cause injury to others. So you'd likely be scrutinized under the last 2, gross or willful and wanton negligence. So what does that mean? Basically, don't be indifferent. Don't act with utter disregard. Don't neglect the safety of others. And just don't be deliberately, intentionally disregarding or indifferent to things that you know matter to the safety of others. Next slide for me. And I will admit that it is a little difficult for me not having the benefit of facial expressions. I'm so much better. I work better remotely, but presentations, I'm better if I can see at least one person. Thank you. I appreciate you who came on camera. So I feel like I'm flying through this without being able to read whether it's being absorbed or, whether I'm making any sense. But here's the things that lawyers and judges are going to look at to determine whether someone was grossly negligent or willfully and wantonly negligent. And again, this is not an all-inclusive list. These are just, some considerations for you guys. First thing, they're going to look at the facts. What happened? What are the damages? Who was injured? How were they injured? What are the events that led up to it? Who's involved? Are there witnesses? What evidence is there to show that these things happened? Then at that point, then we kind of start, looking at plans, training, reports. Did you have a plan? Did it follow ICS or NIMS? If not, what did it follow? Where did it come from? Who drafted it? Was it approved? Who approved it? Did it have buy-in from all the mentioned agencies or partners? And this is where a lot of times we know of EMAC requests for, resources really, but EMAC requests are really also liability contracts. So just, yes, they're great for providing resources and personnel, but it's also if another county or agency provides those and something goes wrong, who does the liability go to? EMAC requests cover that usually. And then also, did you train on those plans? Who trained on them? Who trained you? We have some cases where, we have had to go to our public safety training center and go and pull training records on people involved in lawsuits and go who trained them and then go look at the training of the trainer. It just depends on how far back, it's needed to kind of solve the puzzle. If you are specifically named in a lawsuit, we're also going to look at, who do you take orders from? Who gave you those orders? Are you operating under the order of somebody else, or are you just going rogue and doing your own thing? So there's lots of different pieces that kind of go into the Tetris game. And then we'll also look at AARs. How do they compare? Are you doing AARs first and foremost? And then there is an area of negligence law called negligent failure to warn. And I don't know specifically if Virginia has this or has a carve out for it, but it started in product liability cases. We all know those crazy disclaimers that we might find on, bread or eggs or our food boxes that says, do not bake these rolls with the plastic still on it. Those came from lawyers and product liability cases. Failure to warn came from that area of law, which is if a product that you're using is dangerous, the company may, again, everything is vague. It depends. Everything depends. But they need to warn you about something that might be dangerous for you in the use of that product. I've seen in the last couple years more negligent failure to warn starting to come up as it relates to basically administrative law and government functions. Did the government warn you of a disaster? Did they, did they warn you that there was civil unrest? Did they warn you that that the bridge was down for disrepair before you tried to drive your car over it? So I'm starting to see that a little bit more. I don't have specific examples to offer you, but I'm sharing with this group for awareness that, we're going to be looking at your communications, depending on who's hurt. Of course, we're probably going to FOIA or request and discovery your interoffice and interagency communications. How were they sent? We're going to check every mode of how you send them. Trust me, lawyers know that Signal and all of those other cool apps exist, and we can subpoena those companies. Was that a standard method of communication? However you sent these messages. And then what communications did you send to the public? Was there a risk to the public? Did you warn them? How were those communications sent? Why were they sent that way? If you're, putting out, I'm just putting out information on some app that nobody uses, but you know that your constituents are primarily using Facebook and the local news, then we're going to question, like, why are you still using this old outdated system over here? And so that kind of it gets into ESF2 and ESF15, those sorts of things. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list, and it's not meant to scare anybody, but those are the things that that we would primarily start looking at if a lawsuit were to survive immunity challenges in an EM landscape. And that is it for this part of the presentation, because I really want to be more interactive and answer some questions. But the next slide has some contact info, and I know the team is going to share these slides with y'all. So, you guys can always contact me after the fact. As Jim alluded to earlier, I am pretty loud and vocal on Twitter. Everything else is pretty professionally curated. Twitter's where I'm like, go to hell, stop being stupid when people are doing dumb stuff. So if you want like the real taste of me, no holds barred, that's where to find me. And one quick thing before I'm going to turn it over to Daniel or Jim is that I do something I put on my docket this morning for 2:15. So we've got a condensed kind of Q&A interactive session, and I do apologize, but I'm always happy to come back anytime. But I will turn it over to you guys so that you can take the slides down and you can conduct the, however you want to tell everybody to conduct the Q&A and the questions. I'll follow your lead.
Thank you so much, Brandy. Karen, I saw you had a hand up.
I did, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Brandy. Excellent presentation. And you brought up on the last slide, which piqued my interest. So are there any specific obligations that from your experience dealing with notifying our public or notifying our employees, for those of us who are in the room as well, of timeliness, and which platforms and how are we supposed to notify them of a certain incident? Are there any type of examples that you can give us utilizing those platforms or how we're communicating with them?
Sure. So I think the standard goes up when it's a declared disaster or a known risk, right? So if a tornado falls out of the sky, I know tornadoes don't fall, but we're going to use fun verbs. The standard's a little bit different. If it's a hurricane and we all know it's coming, that's a different story. I think let me say one more disclaimer. In my experience, the things that lead to the failure to warn usually have to do, and no offense to anybody on this call, permission to speak freely, usually have to do when politicians get involved and want to control, or elected officials or leaders want to get involved and control the message. And when there's a lot of hands in the cookie jar, if I'm being honest. The most recent example, and I haven't looked to see what legislation, or not legislation, what lawsuits may have come from it, if any yet, is Hurricane Ian in Florida, where I forget which county it was, where they didn't evacuate. It was part of their plan. There was a trigger in their plan for when tropical storm force winds were expected to exceed this, and when storm surge floods were expected to exceed this, they would issue an evac order. And they would, notice the public about it. They didn't. And the storm caused a significant amount of damage and loss of life and loss of property. The most important thing being, without the evac order, people didn't leave and the loss of life was on them. Now, from where I sat, again, I don't know the facts, I was not there. From where I sat, it looked like a classic politicians trying to control the message, probably telling them, oh, the storm, the eye of the storm is going to go over here. It's no big deal. We don't need to issue an evac. And the worst case scenario happened. You know, your ESF 15 should know where your citizens and constituents are and which platforms to use for them. You're going to want to post those things and share that knowledge, something, you know, where you know people are and where the agencies typically post their information, you know, Facebook, Twitter, press releases, or, you know, quick messages to reporters so they can get on the news, whatever the, you know, the ESF 15 annex has. You're going to want, because I'm going to be looking at, is that normally where you post stuff at? Or, you know, what is the normal op tempo of the things that you post? And why didn't you follow it? I'm going to probably be looking at patterns to identify a pattern, and to see if you followed it. So I think, you know, when the requirements for life safety go up, that's also when the requirements to warn people go up. And I see Jared's got a hand up.
Hey, that's me. Can you guys hear me? Cool. So I know one example of that have to act is within the higher education realm is under the Clery Act. I am curious, I didn't catch all of your intro, but how much experience do you have with providing this kind of guidance to the higher education sector? Is this all kind of exclusive to municipal and county and that kind of stuff, or nonprofit or whatever, or do you include anything with higher ed too?
We do include stuff in higher ed. This right here is a very, very high level stuff. Like, you know, I'm just including state statutes. If your agencies or organizations or employers require something different, that's in addition to everything that I've laid out. My law partner, who I practice with, and he is licensed in Virginia and Georgia. We actually practice in higher education. And he was general counsel for a state university for a number of years and a professor. So we have provided guidance on these sorts of things to different schools. I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, I have done presentations and had these discussions, and we practice in the higher ed space. So it kind of intersects there.
Randy, this is Jim. I'm really interested in the comments you made about timely warnings of an incident. So having been on the commission to investigate the Virginia Beach shooting that happened in 2019, one of the things that we looked at was how they were essentially employees of the city, how they were notified. And it was really a worst case scenario because apparently they were between alert notification systems. And so those who got the alert got it by email from the human resources department at the end of the day, which is not anywhere near adequate. But it was interesting to talk about because when we look at our core capabilities, you remember the target capability list that gave measures that, you know, the public will be alerted within an hour or so of awareness of the incident and stuff like that. There was nothing, no industry standard, if you will, for something as fast acting as an active threat. So, I mean, being able to get a message internally. I mean, so the code that we had in Virginia says being able to alert the community and not necessarily your internal staff. So there were all kinds of gaps that we identified, but it's interesting to hear that you would be looking for patterns for, you know, those types of quick incidents as well, and not necessarily a long duration incident like a storm making its way across the Atlantic.
I would be looking at stuff, and most attorneys would be looking at stuff that's related to the underlying claims of negligence. So in order for a lawsuit to start, somebody who's been injured and their lawyer makes a claim against you. You know, person A versus person B, C, D, and it can be an agency or whomever. And then they make claims, and those claims will say, and usually in Virginia, when we file suits in Virginia, Virginia requires a lot more detail in their lawsuits when you file them. In Georgia, we can just say this person was negligent, they had a duty, they breached the duty, it caused these damages, the end. And then you can kind of get into more. Virginia requires very specific pleadings. And so, you know, we would take those pleadings and we would look and see, okay, what are the claims being made? Well, this person's, I want to be sensitive to those that, you know, we've all lived through some traumas, but let's say this claim is somebody saying I was injured because, you know, my county emergency management agency did not tell me to evacuate a hurricane. We'll just use that. And so at that point, whatever the claim is and the things that lead up to the claim, that's what we're going to be looking at. So if it is a quick moving incident like an active shooter, yes, we're going to, you know, look at those very quick messages and information that's kind of going back and forth. And what we're looking for in there is, did you know that there was a risk and then consciously make the choice to not, you know, to not warn people? You know, if you knew and you were doing everything you could to get the message out, but let's say your comms equipment failed or power lines are down or, you know, something like that, that's not deliberate or recklessly being indifferent. That's just, you know, technology failure, if you would, or equipment failure. But we're just going to be kind of looking at the cause and trying to figure out, why did that fail? Was that human error? Was that tech error? I will say, to your point, Jim, especially as you mentioned that you guys, you know, during that incident, they were in between their alert and warning systems. I almost had a coronary, I lose track of time, a month or two ago, when basically overnight in Florida, they decided they were getting rid of Everbridge because of a faulty warning that went out at 4 o'clock in the morning and people were bothered. And to me, there's way more liability in them immediately getting rid of Everbridge than any liability of bothering people because it woke them up at 4 o'clock in the morning, because other agencies were tied into the Everbridge alert system. You know, God forbid there would be some incident, and if Everbridge is gone, there's no way to warn the public. Like, to me, there was way more liability in getting rid of it. Sure, if they want to phase out, great. But almost overnight, they were just like, nope, we're getting rid of them. And other public health agencies, EMAs, downstream, they were like, what are we going to do? We're tied into that system. And if we get rid of it, basically they just kind of messed up the whole ESF2, ESF15 flow that everybody had been trying to, you know, to work around. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is a lawsuit. You know, let's say in Florida there was some sort of danger, and a local EMA wanted to send out a message, but they decided to get rid of Everbridge. Politicians decided to get rid of their system. If the EMA didn't have a backup or a backup plan, they couldn't warn the public. So the liability's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, you know, we're Everbridge users here, and that definitely piqued our interest. We were kind of watching that because, I mean, as much as we use Everbridge, I mean, we were really looking at user error and just trying to save face. But I mean, I can't ever not justify, even if it's an errant message, if we're trying to test the system, then we're erring on the side of safety versus.
That's what I said, Jim. I was like, so the system did exactly what it was trying to test for, whether there were flaws in it. We found one. Like,
right.
It did what it was supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. Mission successful. So
exactly.
So as far as active threat incidents, I mean, I know that it's common to say, well, this is unprecedented, but unfortunately, I think it's not unprecedented anymore. So should there be the expectation that localities have a certain degree of training in place and their technology is in order and an effective comprehensive plan for an active threat response? I mean, the answer I'm sure is yes, but from a liability standpoint, I mean, would localities not be liable if they don't have improved plans here in 2023?
So there's a running joke that every question that you ask a lawyer will be answered first with "it depends." Jim, it depends.
Right.
Will the state of Georgia be liable if they don't have an earthquake in their plans? Maybe not, because we don't usually get earthquakes. And this, I think, is really going to go towards the level of knowledge of the attorneys that are handling these cases. I would know to go look at the THIRA. Is it a known threat? Is it a known risk? Is it, how does it look based on all the other threats in your area? I know that we're having more and more, especially man-made incidents, but a whole lot more disasters and incidents in general that lots of us haven't prepared for. But for the most part, I'm going to be looking at, if something happens, did you know that it was a risk, first of all? Like, our state EMA director probably doesn't know that earthquakes are a risk because they probably aren't in Georgia. So to answer your question, Jim, it depends. It depends on, and that's where sometimes pulling those open records and those emails and asking for the FOIA folks to pull by keyword is determining, did you know there was a risk? And if you did, how much weight did you give it based on trying to solve for all the other risks? And if you knew it was a risk and you were like, I'm just not dealing with that because I just don't want to plan for tornadoes or active threat situations, that's a different story. So it really depends on the facts of the situation, and I would say the best guidance there is to go with what risks are known to you or to those in charge and solve for those. And if there are other tertiary minor risks, then something in the plan that just says, for all other incidents of this magnitude, follow this plan. That way it's not because the plans are the plans and you can roll them out for, they're kind of all encompassing. And they can be generic enough to be applied to different incidents. So that's kind of where my recommendation would be on that, would be go, I wouldn't expect people in Michigan to have a hurricane plan, but they might put in their plan, like if we randomly get a hurricane because of, climate disaster or something like that, then follow our winter storm plan with modifications. Does that make sense, Jim? That was a big, more round answer.
Yeah. No, that was excellent. Thank you. So I'm trying, does anyone else have any questions? Because I'm going to keep going.
Jim, I do.
Go ahead, Karen.
Brandy, I have kind of I don't know if this is an odd question or the flip side of that, but liability, immunity, say the flip side of that, you've got a hurricane coming and the emergency manager calls for folks to evacuate. With, say the storm changes course after he's called the evacuation, and businesses may close, costing folks money, I guess. And the storm has changed course, is there any liability, or would the emergency manager be covered under that immunity?
Again, it depends, and this is not legal advice. In my mind, there's very little risk of a lawsuit because you are acting on good information. You were acting for the safety of others based on the information you had at the time. Economic damages usually can't be claimed, or they're really hard to claim. Your gross and your willful and wanton liability is if something egregious like loss of life, huge injury, hospital bills. economic damages, loss of pay for a couple of days, et cetera. That's more of like a magistrate court, Judge Judy's court level of whatever. The liabilities that I discussed earlier are more large and egregious. And I will say, you brought up a great point, and all of us as practitioners have seen it. It wasn't until I went through law school that I started to understand it. All of us feel like, or at one time or another, have felt like our elected officials have waited too long to declare a disaster. They hedge their bets until the last minute. I know we went through that a couple times with some hurricanes in Georgia. It's like, call for the evac order already. Like, we need time to do, contraflow and everything else. And they're hedging their bets for that exact reason, to try to save money so they're not on the hook for the economic loss in case they're wrong. In case a storm does turn, they're waiting till the last minute so that they don't cause too much economic disruption and overtime pay for contraflow and other responders. That's the exact reason, is they're trying to not make that declaration until legally and economically they're willing to be on the hook for it.
Thank you.
Well, let me publicly thank Karen for continuing to keep me out of trouble and out of jail. So thanks for asking that question. So, Brittany, I don't know what they were called in the Army, but in the Navy, those sailors who thought they knew their way around the system, they were called sea lawyers. They knew everything, right? And so there are some in the emergency management field as well, and they always say, well, don't call it a plan, call it a framework, and that gives you the flexibility to kind of do whatever you need to do. Is there a differentiation between framework or plan in the eyes of the law?
Unless it's specifically outlined in the law, let's pretend, God forbid, I'm suing you, and we're pretty savvy. We're gonna know if it's a plan, but somebody just wants to call it something different, because we're gonna go, okay, we'll get real broad with it. What document or information do you follow at this time? I don't care what you call it. We're going to ask you for the document. We're going to ask you for, we're not going to get nitpicky about words and names, if that makes sense. So, to use the Navy term, so all the EM lawyers out there, proverbial EM lawyers, you can call it what you want. And if you think about it in a little bit different light, there's 50 states in the US, and, Georgia alone has 161 emergency management agencies. Just by virtue of volume, there's going to be different names for different documents across agencies and across states. Whether it's intentional or not, that's just the nature of, and the cops might call it one thing, and the fire department might call it another, and EM might call it another, and the city might call it one thing, and the county might call it another, then the regional might call it something else. We recognize that, and our language is going to be much broader.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I see Jared has a question online. Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, I want to tag in on that one about framework and everything. So we, coming from an institution prior to the one I'm at now that experienced a pretty significant event, Virginia Tech, we had, I kind of learned that the way that I need to write my plans needs to be kind of flexible and scalable and everything, NIM centric and everything. But how much leeway does that give with mays instead of shalls, and mights instead of wills, kind of thing when you come to sue me over it?
Well, hopefully you'll retain me first, so I don't have to sue you. But the reality is, first of all, lawyers write, I call it very vague anyway. So usually if we see a document like that, we're like, oh, their lawyer reviewed it, because we can spot it. I always, as a general practice, recommend there's no right answer here. I always say, leave it scalable. Unless it needs to be, you will do this, leave it flexible. From a legal standpoint, if I'm going to, bring a lawsuit, it's not so much what's written in the document, whether it says may or whether it says shall. I'm going to go, did you follow it? Why did you put that in the document? Did you intend to follow it when you did put it in the document? When's the last time you updated the document? Those sorts of things. That's really what I'm looking for. The actual plain language of the document, I don't really care too much about, because I know that it's not written by lawyers. Judges know that it's not written by lawyers. And there's a lot of very, very experienced EMAs out there that don't necessarily have higher education. They don't know where to put a comma or a period, but they know their stuff and they're on it. Their plans are, maybe not written at academic levels, but their plans are still good, and their plans could be still good as long as they have a plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jared, I wasn't calling you out as the C lawyer, by the way.
Nah, man, not at all.
So, Randy, you mentioned on one of your first slides, did the plan use NIMS and ICS? And so, knowing that all the localities throughout the nation adopted NIMS and ICS as the command and control pillar, in order to be eligible for Homeland Security grant dollars, if an incident occurs and the locality does not utilize ICS and things go south, is that exposure to the locality as well?
No more so than any other exposure in my mind. And the reason, and unless it's specifically written into some sort of legislation at whatever level is applicable, in my mind, let's say it's not written to ICS or NIMS. My next question would be like, what is it written to? Where did you get it from? Who drafted it? As long as it's following some method to the madness, that lets me know that it is a plan, or it was created with the intention of being a plan. Whereas if it's just somebody with a crayon writing on a restaurant napkin, maybe the intent was not for that to be a plan. I've also seen a lot of locales, which I think is fine. They share plans and they just update it or modify it for themselves. And that is, that's great, so long as it, applies to the risks in your area and covers what it needs to cover. So to answer your question, I think I don't remember the question. It just went away. Great. You guys just saw my memory loss just go away. I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. I mean, and to me, I'm seeing a difference between council adopting NIMS as a response mechanism versus what's in the plan and has to be followed. So no, that makes perfect sense. But
yeah,
now,
I mean, if
as
it
far as the threats
doesn't, it
that-
doesn't, but I'm like, where did you get it? Did you borrow it from your buddy Jim in the next county over? Did you bother to update it? Like, did you go on LegalZoom and print it? Which I don't think LegalZoom has EM documents yet, but I'm going to dig a little bit further than face value whether it follows NIMS or not. Because if it does, let's say on the cover sheet, say it follows NIMS, and I might be the only attorney in the country that would do it, I'm going to go looking to see if it really does, and it's not just a cool logo on the front.
Right. Well, as far as the threats that we face in our region, there's a lot of talk about climate change, and there are some localities that are planning for that and some that are not.
Yep.
With, rising seas, to which we're especially vulnerable to, and excessive heat, are those damages to property or health? Can a locality be liable for not taking those into account in their plans? If they don't plan for climate change later, can they be liable down the road? I guess.
Possibly. Again, it's really going to be determined by what is outlined by your legislature at whatever level is applicable for you. And my personal opinion, is I think that the requirements for that are going to, we'll start seeing more in the coming years, and they're kind of going to be, the best way I can put it is vague, almost like resilience requirements are. I think climate change and accounting for climate change, we're going to see under the resilience part of disaster operations. And whether there's a liability or not, you know, it depends. The Surfside building collapse, I haven't read, you know, much of the lawsuits too much, but, you know, did they make claims that climate change was the reason for the collapse? Or, you know, and then I'm going to go looking to the city and county plans and the builder's permits and go, okay, did they account for, you know, storm surge and cracked foundations? You know, I'm going to go putting the pieces together to see who might be liable and what they did to try to fix the problem.
Okay. Now, Brandy, I have tons of more questions, but I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have your appointment. Instead of asking if this and that will hold a city liable, what resources could you direct us to be proactive in order to do the right thing, which is also the legal thing to do? But if we wanted to do the right thing, where could we go to make sure we're doing that?
So here's I'm going to, you know, nutshell it for you. I put a lot of legal language and, you know, scary stuff in those slides. But here's the reality. If you are doing your job and you are doing what you're supposed to do, and you are genuinely trying to keep others safe and, you know, keep your team safe, and you are doing your job to the best of your ability, you're probably fine. The standards that are required under those two levels of negligence are really, if one day you're just like, yep, there's a hurricane coming and screw it, I'm just not putting out any Facebook posts, I'm not letting anybody know it's coming, I'm not, you know, setting up shelters, just like if you just get a big case of the effits and you just don't do nothing, that's when it would come into play. But if you're genuinely, does that mean that you won't be liable? No, but you'll be less liable, if that makes sense. Because there are some things that are out of your control, but really for a person or an agency to be liable, it's got to be really egregious. And to be honest, if anybody in the profession is just that deliberately indifferent, we all need to politely help them find another job, because they don't belong in the service profession of what we do. And I get it. People have bad days, those sorts of things. That's the reality of it, is unless you just just peace out and just let everything go to hell, you're probably going to be fine. A lot of times these liability lawsuits are going to fall on the shoulders of your leaders, like your agency leaders, your elected officials, and your county commissioners, and those sorts of things, because they're the ones that are giving the orders and making the decisions. It's very rarely going to get further into the weeds than that.
Sure. Although we know it rolls downhill. So.
Well, sure, absolutely. But the lawyers are only going to be looking at the people at the top.
Gotcha. Brandy, again, I sincerely want to thank, Daniel.
Sorry about that, sir. We have another question online. Cheryl, is that
Yep.
okay?
Yeah.
Cheryl, go ahead. You have a question?
Hi, yeah, I'm driving, so if you hear background noise, I apologize, but I have a
That's
quick
okay.
question. I work at a Center for Independent Living, and a number of centers for independent living and disability advocates around the country have brought lawsuits that you mentioned, such as New York and California, just to name a few. When you're looking at lawsuits, do you look at precedents of previous law actions?
Can you repeat the last part, Cheryl? It broke up just after you asked when I'm looking at lawsuits. Can you say the rest of that sentence?
Sure. Do you look at precedents of other lawsuits in, say, New York and California when you're looking at legal actions that might be taken? To see what was done in those states.
We do. The first thing that we would do, I'm sorry, I cut you off, Cheryl. Did you have something to add?
No, that's it.
Okay, that is a great question. The first thing that we're going to look for is what causes of action can we bring as it relates to that city, state, county, whatever. That's the first step. And then, from a civil procedure standpoint, which court do we bring it in? State court, superior court, district court, circuit court. I won't bore you with all of that. But then we kind of go and we look in the state law or, the law of that judicial circuit and see if any other cases similar to it have occurred in that state or in that circuit. And we kind of see what happened. We kind of look to see, are the facts similar? What happened? How did the court rule? What was the finding? What did the court say was the most important thing to that yielded their ruling on it? And we'll also look, when we're making arguments, let's say the courts previously have ruled in a way that's not favorable to whatever side you're on, I'm going to go look at other states as well. And other cases with similar sets of facts, with similar laws, what laws do they have in place? And that really is only so good as to let me make a policy argument to my court, whatever court I'm in front of, to say, yes, the precedent in this circuit and in this state is X, but, and it's based on this ruling. But I'd like to point you to this case over here in New York or California where the facts were similar, but they ruled a different way. And that gives judges an opportunity to think about a situation a little bit differently. So to answer your question, yes, we will go and do that, but it's usually for very narrow reasons. And also to see, especially if it's a company or an organization that has a large footprint with locations in different areas, has anybody else sued them for the same reason?
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and thanks for what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Brandy, thank you. Is there another? Looks like Cheryl's hand up there.
She's driving. We're not going to make her take her hand down.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. All good. All good.
Nobody else said it. We're good.
Cool. Thank you. So Brandy, again, thank you. I know your time in the legal profession is incredibly valuable. And you're willing to spend time with us and actually giving us meaningful answers that we can work with. It depends, but then also elaborate, improve our plans, because that's really what we're always trying to do. I feel comfortable, with the team and our plans and our partnership with Cheryl and the Independence Center. I mean, we really try to be inclusive and all that we do to make our plans as representative of the community as possible. And the willingness that you had to share with us your thoughts are going to make us all the better.
Well, thanks for having me. And my contact information is in the slides. I really mean it. Call me, text me, follow me, message me, because I'm a nerd about emergency management and I'm a nerd about the law. There's nothing I love more other than Twitter than just nerding out about those two topics. So my lines are open to y'all. I will not invoice you.
Thank you. And that's why I'll retain you if ever there is a need. Awesome. Brandy, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Let me just say this personally. Well, personally, I'm very directly involved with autism, ADHD, and other diagnoses, not only with my own, family, but extended family and friends as well. And I just want to say that, in my eyes, and I look forward to sharing your story with my daughters. What an inspiration. The fact, one, you made it through boot camp with diagnoses, but then,
Jim, I wasn't diagnosed till last year.
You're kidding. Wow.
Mm-mm. No, I had the other diagnoses for a long time. And if I'm being honest with everybody in this room, it was Instagram and TikTok that the algorithm, just engaging with that algorithm, started to make me go, maybe. And I think it's been about a year and a half now. And sure enough, I'm very much so. So I'm not sure the Army would have let me in if they had known about that one. But yeah, I was diagnosed at 41, 42 years old, right as I graduated law school, and took the bar for the first time. That's how I found it. So I appreciate that. But yeah, I made it all the way through all that, but I didn't know I was autistic until recently.
Wow. Well, an inspiration for sure. We look forward to keeping in touch with you over Twitter. I do have some questions I'd like to ask, over time, but thank you for your time today. Well, and for
Yeah,
your
and I'm really
presentation.
sorry I have to leave early. That was unexpected. So I appreciate your patience in that.
No worries. And Daniel will probably be in touch to get your address because we do have a token of appreciation that we'd like to send your way.
That sounds great. Thanks so much. And I'll send something back because we just ordered some fun marketing stuff for the law office that's also for emergency managers, like waterproof document bags and 8-in-1 ink pens. So I'll get some of those out to y'all too.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thanks, everybody.
How do you follow that?
It was phenomenal.
That was awesome. And Daniel, thanks for being the face of the LEPC on the video.
Hey,
Hey, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to take one for the team.
So, I mean, I don't have much beyond that. There was just a couple of things that I was going to share that we have coming up, and we usually do a roundtable to make sure, just an opportunity to share what all is going on. I do want to recognize Susie from our safety office and Tracy, if he's on as well. We're working with them to incorporate a lot of the active threat training plans, drills and stuff for the upcoming year to make sure that we are better positioned to respond to any type of incidents. We have, myself and Daniel, Scott, and Karen, we've created binders for every department. We call them the Red Book, which has, acute incidents. Our emergency operations plan or framework, we might change the name now, that talks about, the longer term, bigger disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, and things like that. The red binder has to do with fire, tornado, active threat, and those things that are a lot more acute. So how we get folks evacuated out of the building, where they go, how they're accounted for, and all that stuff, it's in that binder. But a lot of the departments don't even know that it exists. So working with Susie and Tracy, we're going to be having a training with a representative of all the different departments, explain to them what's in the binder, the expectation that they share amongst their colleagues in the workplace, what's in that binder. And then they're our touch point with each agency, every department for those drills and things like that. So we have that coming. We have Preparedness Night with the Tides on May 31st. It's a double header. Love to see you guys out there. Stop at one of the tables. And it's also the 4-year anniversary of the May 31 shooting in Virginia Beach. So Virginia Beach will not be there, but we'll certainly be thinking about them. Emergency Management Advisory Committee. I think I shared with you guys what that's going to be. Council is going to vote on that on June 13th. And the idea is to have that committee added to the list of city council boards and commissions. The idea is to have folks who have no experience whatsoever in disaster planning, but can give us instead ground truth of what their expectations, what their thoughts, what their ideas are on how we can improve in our planning work. The idea is, again, not so much focus on disaster planning expertise, but bringing in different cultures, backgrounds, and things like that to help take a look at our documents and, come up with recommendations for improvement. It is just an advisory committee, but I'm looking forward to getting some feedback from them on how we can make our plans more realistic and more useful throughout the community. And then in August, either 12th or 19th, we're looking at having a public safety day at Harbor Park. The tides are gone, so we will be able to get the whole lot. Public safety day, as well as a cook-off, a disaster cook-off, to be called Recipe for Disaster. And so we see that as an opportunity, not only to share, fun recipes on, when power goes out, how are you going to cook for your family or otherwise feed them with non-electric utilities and non-perishable food items. But I'd like for it to be a resource rodeo for the things that you guys bring to the table that folks would otherwise not see. They have no idea. They know police is going to come to the table. They know fire is going to come to the table, but they have no idea what you guys bring to the table. They never see it. So I'm hoping that Public Safety Day will be an opportunity for folks to kind of, see and touch some of the stuff from a lot of our partners who make up Team Norfolk Emergency Operations. And just make it a really good kickoff to peak hurricane season. We were going to have it earlier, but that opportunity did not exist. So we're looking at either the 12th or 19th of August, weather permitting, and we'd love to have you guys be a part of that. With that.
Got Jared online. We're ready for the roundtable, sir?
Yeah.
All right. Jared, I see your hands up, sir.
Yeah, I got a couple things. First one is we're interested in once more information is available in partnering on the Public Safety Day at Harbor Park. Thanks for letting us know about that. About the Emergency Management Advisory Committee, I'm curious what level of crossover there's going to be in terms of programming or anything. Is it going to be kind of more in the same, or is there going to be a wholly different theme to it versus LEPC?
It's going to be different. LEPC is, this group who does disaster planning on a regular basis.
Right.
So we know, we live the life, we know the language and all that stuff. The folks who make up the advisory council or committee is the complete opposite.
Okay.
So they're able to tell us, so I may think, I may be fat, dumb and happy in my office thinking where our plans are great. But then if someone with different abilities takes a look at it or different cultures, as we saw during the pandemic, they may have a different take altogether. So just getting that feedback on how it can be improved, who else we could bring to the table, is really what it's all about. So no expertise, just share with them what we have, maybe give them a couple problem statements that they can help us, find resolution and improve the planning.
So is that going to be kind of like a subgroup that kind of reports their information back up to LEPC, or is there going to be a request or expectation of folks that are on LEPC to participate in EMAC as well?
I wouldn't say there's the expectation. You might be invited as a subject matter expert, but the participants will be appointed per council members. So I don't get to say, since it's going to be a board or commission with council, they decide who's on it. I can provide recommendations, but again, my goal is to just hold myself accountable to folks in the community who might think differently than I do, and really, share with them what we have and discuss ways that we can improve.
Sounds good. I appreciate that. I've got my own EMAC on campus at ODU, so I may want to steal some of your guys' ideas, charter, et cetera, once that thing is up and running. The last thing I had is just an advisory for everybody. About 3 weeks from tomorrow, on Thursday, June 8th, the Virginia Army National Guard Civil Support Team, in coordination with the Virginia Department of Military Affairs, is going to be doing some form of a full-scale exercise on campus. Evidently, they're looking to spread the love at the state agency-owned facilities around the Commonwealth, and they haven't been to ODU yet, so they're going to have a contingent of about, it's actually a capstone exercise for a week's worth of training, where they're going to have probably X number, probably 10 evaluators, and I think 30 guards persons that are going to be participating in level A form of hazardous materials exercise. It'll be taking place at the ODU soccer stadium on West 43rd Street. This will be an all-day event, basically from 0500 to about 15 or 1600 on Thursday, the 8th of June. And they will be doing some simulated releases of agents, some like yellow smoke or whatever, and they'll be doing a bunch of staging over in our lot 43, which is right beside the HRSD plant, and we're in coordination with them so that they know what's going on as well. But we're trying to get the heads up to folks out as much as we can, because we don't want people freaking out that folks are going to be walking around in level A gear on campus thinking there's something really wrong. But that's just a heads up. We're going to be also coordinating that internally internally with notifications and with all of our partners around in the neighborhoods and such, and with our media partners. But this is just so we can continue to spread that word. Any questions? Feel free to entertain them. Thanks.
Thanks, Jared. We'll help get the message out internally over here. Any chance that some of us can go over and be a fly on the wall?
Yeah, come on. I'll send you guys what information I have. I'm trying to get a little bit more from Department of Military Affairs, just so I have some more meat to it beyond just my notes with our on-site meetings. And but I'll give you guys a heads up offline.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
No, sir.
No one else? Anyone else online want to chime in on anything?
This is Cheryl. It's not emergency management oriented, but it is about differently abled or people with disabilities. I'm doing a presentation for the Hampton Roads Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Consortium about people with disabilities and actually in a workplace and what employers might need to look at to be accommodating to them. So I just wanted to let you know about that. It's on June 8th. I'll send you the flyer, so if you'd like to pass it out.
Yeah, we're happy to. Thanks, Cheryl.
Okay.
Hey Cheryl, this is Karen. Will you send me the flyer, please?
Will do.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Red Cross?
Well, we had in Virginia Beach the tornado, and the city put together the rec center up in Great Neck as a resource center, not as a shelter. They said that no one needed to be sheltered because they found other places to stay. The city works with Hampton Roads volunteers for donations and for volunteers to organize them. They decided that community didn't need any help, so they did not stand up Hampton Roads volunteers.
Okay.
So people were coming to the rec center because the rec center did have like Red Cross mental health counselors and different resources there. And they overwhelmed the staff at the rec center.
Oh, really?
With donations.
Oh,
with
gotcha.
Coming to help, and they didn't have the staff there because the city didn't stand up Hampton Roads volunteers.
Okay.
So when you're thinking after a disaster,
Yeah.
this community doesn't need it. People are still going to come, and you're still going to have to handle a situation like that.
Yeah.
You know, they had to turn away Wawa that wanted to come and provide drinks for everyone.
Okay.
They just didn't have the staff to entertain it, talk with them, nothing. So that's something that you should think about when you have the Salvation Army. What specifically are they going to do? Are they gonna help with your food donations, money donations?
Yeah.
Good donations, volunteers? So all that needs to be planned out ahead of time and then stand it up, even if you think that they might not need it.
Okay. No, that's a great point, because I wasn't thinking there was much of a need either. A lot of them had insurance and, they weren't gonna look for sheltering, but the donations are gonna come anyway. I wasn't even thinking about that. So, no, thank you for that.
And there are now churches in the area who are trying to help because that is an area where you have a number of elderly who usually maintain their properties. But this is just too much for them. And they sometimes don't realize that themselves.
Okay.
So there are a few churches now who are organizing for donations for volunteers and that, but it's all nothing organized.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, man. Natural gas.
Hey, really appreciate the invite and look forward to being invited to other ones that you have in the future.
It's like the mafia, that once you're in.
Good.
Can't cut it.
That's good.
Check out the community.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to make sure that we're a good community partner with all the cities.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm glad you did. Looking forward to working with you.
Yes, sir.
Certainly had enough conversations on the phone.
Right.
And glad you were able to get from Hanover to here.
Yeah,
No
no
problem.
problem.
So,
The HRBT cooperated.
right, there you go. We've made some
Both ways.
Yeah, right. No, looking forward to working.
Yeah, same here. Thank you.
How about the libraries? I don't think I have anything this month. Okay, all right. That's always a good thing. Eggleston.
Eggleston, yeah, my name's Jeff Hole, and I'm introduced Steve LeBeau here. Eggleston has decided to bring on him to be a full-time safety officer for the company. Where, as you know, Eggleston has 18 locations and many different variations of everything, and he'll be a great asset in help bringing our safety program even to a higher level than it is now, because it's well needed in all of our aspects. But we're looking forward to seeing what we can do together, and
Whatever we can do to help, let us know. You're going to be working with some great folks who are already security minded, so welcome to the team.
I appreciate that. Oh, he has, when I first week or so, after trying to get my feet on the ground, my wheels were spinning and the proper people weren't there and everything. And I was taking 6 deep breaths and exhaling only 3. And,
Right.
you know, and then the proper person came in and said, here, pointed his name on the list. He said, go, don't stop.
Yeah.
And after that, we get moving. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy being more involved. The more involved I can be, the more we can share. Hopefully I can be a good, strong asset, and I can take what you all share with me back and use it back here with my Eggleston team, because I gotta grow, that the team's gotta grow. It's gotta be more cognizant, and it's gotta grow as we move up.
Now I'm going to call you chief just to mess with you.
That's
Based on our story. So.
That works.
Parks, pretty the same.
HRT.
Hey, I'd like to say thank you to you and your team, because for those that are online and those here in Norfolk, I get the opportunity or the disadvantage to have to deal with about 8 different areas, cities, counties, et cetera. And I can tell you that what you put out in information, activities to be involved with on the preparedness side, things like the different things that come at the LEPC, outstanding, but bar none, top in the area. And I say that in all the counties. No. No, seriously, incredible difference. And we talk about integration in all the FEMA literature and things like that. And I think, there's a role model right here in Norfolk. And I'm proud to be part of Norfolk staff. Friday night last week, we did a law enforcement blitz in cooperation with the TSA Viper team and the Coast Guard. We ran around through Norfolk and all our different forms of transportation. You may have heard some feedback on that. When we turned on the lights at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the cockroaches ran, and we had a very calm and uneventful Friday night.
Nice.
Imagine that. You probably heard on the streets. It was like, what the heck's going on? We had about 30 people, and we all rolled out in our tactical gear and just had a good time. The reason I say that is not just the law enforcement side. Quantitatively, that evening, we encountered just as many homeless people with challenges with disabilities, alcohol, drugs, where we took a moment and said, let's try to get you help. Let's get you down to this center. Let's, can we get you over to here, or whatever the case may be. Quantitatively equal to the number of people that we said, that's illegal. There was also an equal number that we said, can we help you?
That's awesome.
And that was super cool. So I say that because we're always trying to take care of people. We're ramping up for Harvard Fest, obviously. Yesterday, a successful day, about 40 firefighters from various different stations in Norfolk area came over, and we introduced them to the Proterra electric bus. In addition, I am trying to push that forward because Department of Transportation is encouraging the electric buses as a means of emergency energy. One of those buses will power a city building for days. One bus. They did say how many megahertz, kilowatts, whatever it is, that, and what we need to do is pursue that on a inverter type of thing, where if we got it, what's a favorite name? Aunt Sally? Is that the favorite expression, Aunt Sally? If Aunt Sally's home needs power, and there's a breakdown of resources where everybody wants generators, we need to walk through that at our end, because by 2035, we'll be a total electric fleet.
That's
So,
fascinating.
yeah, so I'm trying to push that, so for that, I mean, but good training with the firefighters, they were happy with that. And also moving forward, we've moved the second round on a transportation security grant. How it applies to Norfolk is, we are looking at countering the vehicles used as a weapon and congregation soft targets of people, or somebody might put an explosive device. So, Harbor Park, Town Point, things, places, a ballpark, ODU, Jared, where people jump on after a game, or they're at the Chartway Arena or whatever. We're looking at bollards and cans, and we'll just let it go at that because, we really don't want, like Las Vegas. They announced it in the newspaper and they said where they put everything. I didn't think it was the smartest idea.
Great idea.
Great idea. And the last thing is we're moving on to a scoping call with the National Exercise Program. We're recommending a continuity exercise for next year. And we're going into scoping call with National Exercise Program for that scoping call. And what it'll be is where we have to figure out how to, the exercise is called the morning after. And it's going to be after a catastrophic event. Doesn't matter what the event is. What do you do the next morning to make economic resiliency for the city of Norfolk? What responsibility do we have to get people back to work, get businesses back on again after an event? Thank you very much.
Let us know how we can support.
Absolutely. Yep, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for everything. Utilities. Minus the meatballs that you used to have.
I gave them as scripts.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not too much going on.
Anything for me, guys? Nothing else online? All right, well.
Yeah, just real quick, this past month, 911 center has been at our backup site, down the road at First Precinct. And very rudimentary. We typically don't expect to be in there for more than a day when we go over there. We had a furniture upgrade, and then it was timely since General Services said we have some HVACs that we're going to get replaced and lighting in there as well. So that extended the project by about 3 weeks. Tuesday, we're moving back in there, and Monday, we're actually going to have a welcome back event. So our folks have been suffering for the last 7 days in a tiny, it's basically a classroom. They're sitting at desks, nothing more than what we have here. And so think of them when you do next Tuesday. They're going to return to beautiful furniture, nice carpeting, lights that are modern that don't flicker, and an HVAC system that can accommodate the temperature that they want, and not at the will of the 40-year-old HVAC systems in there. So we're very happy to have them back there, and we're looking forward to using that as a recruiting tool to get new folks in there.
Thanks, Danny.
Yep.
As a user, as a team user, never missed a beat. It's been great, and couldn't tell where they were. So thanks to all the team on your side. Phenomenal. Couldn't tell when we were out there and needed them stresses.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Tony, let me just piggyback on that. With the proposed budget that council is going to vote on, I think on June 6th now, or it's not at the end of May. I think there was a delay. So the recommendation is that Norfolk formally recognize our dispatchers as public safety. If you're familiar with the Office of Management and Budget, it classifies them as administrative clerical, which if you've ever been in a 911 center is laughable. And so and there's no indication to think it's not going to pass. If and when that gets voted on and approved, Norfolk will be the first in the region to do exactly that. So we're really excited about that. And speaking of recruiting tools, that'll be another great recruitment.
Absolutely.
So if there's nothing else for the good of the order, thank you guys for attending. Thank you for your partnership. And hopefully we'll have a peaceful time until the next meeting. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone online.